would you do for the person you love the most in the world? A question of love and passion that many people can't answer due to a number of reasons, whatever they may be. But if you do find yourself lacking in someone to die for, then a convenient solution is to witness through media, whichever form that media may be, a story of love and of passion. Love stories have been fundamental to the general human psyche for as long as anybody can remember. You have tales of love in ancient mythology, medieval stories of chivalric romance, Elizabethan-era plays with Shakespeare, Gothic novels by Charlotte Bronte, and modern young adult novels about a girl and a vampire, all being linked to a fundamental human emotion, love. Love in stories is an extraordinary feature because it makes it instantly relatable to almost everybody, because at some point or another, a person has felt what love is, be it unconditional love from a parent or romantic love from a partner. Love is an emotion that we all understand is all the more powerful for it. There's something about love as an emotion in stories that I can't explain, because I'm simply not qualified to do so. But what I do know is that when a story about love is done right, then it can be one of the most powerful tales you will ever experience. Let me get to the point of this video. Fate's Day Night, Heaven's Feel is a story about love. A love that blossomed through conflict between two people. One an aspiring hero of justice, and the other a damaged but still fundamentally good person. In this video, I'll be trying to explain why this adaptation of Type Moon's 2004 critically successful visual novel harbors one of the best love stories in anime. Before we begin, let me give you some context. For those unaware about anything that I am talking about, Type Moon published a visual novel written by Kinoko Nasu in 2004 called Fate's Day Night. There are many versions of this visual novel because it originally started out as an adult game and then evolved into something more commercially friendly with the re-releases. But I digress. In the visual novel Fate's Day Night, there are 3 main routes that are subsequently unlocked through the completion of the previous routes, meaning you have to play them in order and beat them to unlock the next one, with there being 3 in total. These 3 routes are the Fate route, which is the opening route to the game, the Unlimited Blade Works route, and the Heaven's Feel route. For this video, I will be primarily discussing the Heaven's Feel route, as that is the route that contains the most focal love story. But I will be mentioning and describing details from the other routes when appropriate. Now that the context is set, we can begin. If I'm claiming that Fate Heaven's Feel has one of the best anime romances, then I better have some strong points to make, because that is quite the claim. I mean, how many romance anime are there? A lot. Simply put, there's a lot of romance anime with a lot of good stories. However, the manner in which Fate Heaven's Feel separates itself from the rest is in these 3 main aspects. The container that the romance finds itself in, the maturity of that romance, and what the romance is saying. Let's start with the container that the relationship between our lovers Emi Ashiro and Mato Sakura find themselves in. In relation with the other Fate's Day Night routes, Heaven's Feel is the 3rd and final route that the player can experience. As such, they already have a sense for how the Holy Grail War works, and the dynamic that servants have with their masters, along with magecraft and other high concepts that are mentioned up until this point. That makes it all the more shocking when the player, or viewer in this case, witnesses the brutality and harsh tone of the story. Did the other routes have segments in which the events unfolding were gruesome and gory? Yes, they did. In Shiro's inner monologue, he loves describing the way that the pain makes him feel in great detail. But the majority of these routes do not linger on the dreadful nature of the events. Instead, they create a unique sense of danger, but nothing too evil in nature. Let me give an example to help describe what I'm talking about. In Unlimited Blade Works, even amongst the battling and strategizing about how to defeat Castor, Tosaka Rin and Shiro still decide to take a day off to go on a picnic with Saber. And I know that in the same day they get attacked by Castor on the bridge, but this is what I mean. In the Fate and Unlimited Blade Works route, you have a lighter but still mostly serious tone. Contrast that to Heaven's Feel, in which you have multiple deaths of previously established characters. In this case, Castor dying in a very anticlimactic way and very bloody as well, while not having those moments of reprieve like having a picnic. This doesn't mean that Heaven's Feel is all doom and gloom. It does have moments where it lets up on the brutality, but those moments are quiet, serene shots of either Fuyuyuki, the town in which the story takes place, or mundane shots of Emiya cooking. Heaven's Feel has a much darker tone than the other stories because it deals with a heavier subject matter, but also because it can play around with characters in a much more sinister way and have an impact on the audience because the audience has already seen these characters and been familiarized with them in case of the visual novel. This dynamic of having a darker tone and making the characters experience something much worse than what they have experienced already is what makes the love story between Shiro and Sakura even more impactful. Because amongst all the blood and death, there's still a love story blooming that keeps the hope of the story alive and prevents it from becoming completely miserable. Most anime love stories revolve around high school or are in real world settings, which are completely valid settings to put these types of stories in, because in real life, you are probably going to find love in an academic setting like high school or college, or in a professional environment like your job or something. But I've always found that the best places to anchor a love story is in settings that either add to the dynamic of the love or make it so that the environment in which the lovers find themselves in is an obstacle in their quest to love each other. And at the end of the story, they have overcome that obstacle and can be together. In this case, the Holy Grail War, in its twisted and malformed nature, acts as something that impedes Sakura's and Shiro's love, and they have to overcome it to achieve happiness. The notion of true love is a bit childish, but I feel if done right and phrased in a certain way, true love can be very powerful, especially if it's in the context of a relationship being in the story. Let me explain. Shiro, to my knowledge, has only fallen in love with one person in the context of Heaven's Feel, which is Sakura. Likewise, Sakura is in love with Shiro. The movie does show that they have known each other for a year and a half, and they are very close, so them having feelings for each other is not out of the ordinary. However, at the climax of Heaven's Feel, Shiro is willing to face death by confronting Saber Alter in order to save Sakura from Angra Mainyu and from Tosaka in a sense, which if not done correctly can come off as a storybook, the White Knight coming to save the day, cliched and unoriginal. But in the context of the development of the relationship between Shiro and Sakura, this isn't the case. Like I mentioned earlier, the movie shows Sakura and Shiro interacting a year and a half before the events of the story, and establishes that they are very well acquainted with one another, and throughout the events of the story, they become even closer, realizing that they do in fact have feelings for each other, and Shiro comes to the conclusion that he would be willing to do anything to protect Sakura. And at the end of the story, deciding that he wants to keep on living, no matter the cost, in order to be with her. The love between Sakura and Shiro is very mature compared to the other stories about love in anime. Instead of playing around with the idea of characters being intimate, Fate Heaven's Feel actually shows you Sakura and Shiro forming that bond that would motivate Shiro's actions later in the story. If I may speak frankly, the reason why this relationship between Shiro and Sakura is so mature is because the movie and visual novel don't skirt around the idea of holding hands or kissing. Instead, they straight up show Sakura and Shiro having intimacy. Straight up, they have sex. Which compared to 90% of the other romance anime, this is a breath of fresh air. But it's mature not only because of the sex, but because they come to natural conclusions about their feelings. Shiro has to understand how he feels about Sakura, and Sakura has to open herself up and accept the idea of having a partner, even though she doesn't deem herself worthy of Shiro. These characters grow, and so does their relationship, and that is what makes it so mature. That the silly story about historical figures being summoned into the modern age in this Japanese town also has a grounded and frankly moving story about loving and acceptance of oneself. The final thing is what the story is saying, what love between Shiro and Sakura really means. This final point is more open, leaving lots of room for interpretation, and I implore you, the audience, to watch the movies for yourself in order to form your own thoughts about what this romance really means. Because what I see in this romance is two people who, despite extraneous circumstances, have found love. I'd like to look at it from the perspective of Sakura, because this is her story, the antagonist and the supporting main character of the story. Sakura has been destroyed from the inside out, and her time at the Mato estate has transformed her into something more wicked and twisted that she has to suppress because she knows the toxicity of it. This can be seen when she tells Shiro that she initially wanted him to keep failing at the pole jump, but was stumped when he kept trying, persisting through failure. At this time, I must imagine that she was hopeless and bitter against the world, succumbed to a fate that she scorned and hated. the second child of the Tosakas that was given up by her father and forced to learn the magics of a twisted and obsessive man who clung so eagerly to life. However, when she saw Shiro, someone who went through a metaphorical hell in the Fuyuki fires at the end of the Fourth Holy Grail War, but kept moving forward and inspired to be a hero of justice like his stepfather, something in her changed. That is the romance that is so impactful to me, a story about a broken person who has discarded any optimism in her life because of the hardship she has faced, being uplifted and made better because of the person who loves her. It's seen in the story. When she first arrives at the Emiya household, you can see it in her eyes and behaviors that she is hollow and cold. But eventually, when she is shown that she is more than just an object or a tool needing to be employed for a goal of a man who has subjugated her to evils of the Mato's magic techniques, then Sakura starts to relearn the joys of life, and Shiro is the person who guides her to happiness. That doesn't mean that Shiro is solely responsible for making Sakura happy, however. When growing as a person and remolding how you view life, a lot of the heavy lifting is done by yourself, and it requires a lot of willpower. That people around you are there to help ease the burden of relieving yourself of that hardship. On Shiro's side, it's a little less complex. Shiro loves Sakura for who she is, and in the story he goes to great lengths showing that devotion to Sakura. But the most pivotal scene is after the incident with Shinji at the school in the park just outside the church, where Shiro gives the dropped house key back to Sakura, even when she tries to push him away because she doesn't deem herself worthy of his love or of anyone's love. This moment is vital to Shiro's relationship with Sakura because it's the moment that solidifies the fact that Shiro doesn't care about Sakura claiming herself to be defiled, or that she's actually a bad person. Shiro believes that if Sakura is bad, then he'll be the one to scold her. What this romance is saying is that people can be broken, twisted, and evil, but it doesn't matter when you love someone because love is greater than any of the faults that may be present. Overall, although my claim of greatest love stories in anime may not hold up because of my lack of any hardy evidence, I still believe that this story is one that everyone interested in anime should watch, read, experience however you like, because it is genuinely very good, at least in my opinion. Not to mention the fact that Ufotable is masters at their craft when it comes to visuals, and that Heaven's Feel has Medusa staying around because Sakura has so much magical energy that she can support his servant. Medusa best girl. I digress. Anyway, thank you for watching, and goodbye.